Jewel crafting is a profession which has a lot of potential to make you a lot of gold all throughout Burning Crusade Classic. Today, we're gonna learn together how you can level this profession up from 1 to 375 in under 1 hour, and as cheap as possible. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First of all, here's the list of all the reagents you'll need to get from 1 to 375. Now keep in mind, this is what most people should need. You may or may not need a bit more or a bit less than what's shown here, depending on your luck. So if you don't want to travel to the auction house multiple times while leveling your profession, I would suggest buying around 10 to 20% more than what's shown for the items in red, and then sell the remaining stuff when you're done. If, however, you're aiming for the cheapest way to level instead of the fastest, buy exactly what's shown here, or even less, and make some trips to the auction house to really be precise and not spend unnecessary gold. Some things to note. The great thing about jewel crafting is that you don't need to buy any rare recipes to level up. Well, at least not until you get to the highest levels. For 90 to 95% of your training, everything will be available from the trainer, so you don't need to worry about anything else. Furthermore, currently as of the time of writing this video, we're in phase 1, and there's no real reason to go beyond level 365, bar a few niche scenarios that we will talk about at the end. So you could actually stop at 365 and just get the remaining levels incidentally from just playing the game normally, and crafting gems for yourself, for guildies, or for selling them on the auction house. Now if you're a Draenei, you definitely don't need to go above level 370 ever while leveling your profession, since you have a racial that increases your jewel crafting level by 5. One last thing, most people will just vendor the items that they get here, which is fine, but if you want to make more money back, I would suggest disenchanting those items. If you don't have an enchanter yourself, you could ask someone around to do it for you, or you could also just vendor everything, that's also fine. Alright, let's get right into it now. The place I would recommend you start leveling your jewel crafting is here in Exodar for the Alliance, or here in Silvermoon for the Horde. There's a vendor close to the trainer and an auction house nearby, so this is the perfect spot. You will have to move to Outland later, however. The tools you'll need to get to 375 are a jeweler's kit, a simple grinder, both obtainable from the vendors near the trainers, and then you'll also need a mercurial stone made from alchemists later, which I did include in the list earlier. So from 1 to 45, craft 75 delicate copper wire. This item will be needed to craft more things later on, so make sure to keep it and craft 75 as that's how much you'll need in total. And it's better to make them now instead of later, as they won't give you any skill ups past 50. From 45 to 50, craft 5 malachite pendants. Based on your luck from the last step, you may need to craft less or more of these. The list of reagents I showed at the start should have you covered until the next step, but if you wanted to save as much gold as possible and bought less, just go ahead and make a trip to the auction house and buy the remaining needed reagents to reach level 50. From 50 to 80, make 35 bronze settings. Make sure to keep these as you'll need them for the next steps. 35 of these is what you'll need to craft the items for the next steps, but this recipe will be yellow for the last 10 levels. So again, based on your luck, you may need to make more or less of these to reach the next step. From 80 to 100, make 20 gloom bends. This recipe will stay red all the way until 100, so don't worry about buying more reagents. From 100 to 110, make 10 rings of silver mite. Similar to the previous one, this recipe will stay red all throughout those 10 levels, so you don't need to buy more reagents for this. From 110 to 120, make 10 heavy stone statue. Again, this stays red all the way through, so 80 heavy stones is exactly what you'll need here. From 120 to 135, make 15 heavy jade rings. It's also red for all 15 levels. Make sure here after you're done to take the journeyman jewel crafting skill. At this point, you can go ahead and vendor or sell all the remaining bronze settings. You won't need them for the rest. And from 135 to 150, make 15 golden dragon rings. Stays red for all 15 levels, so don't overspend. At this point, after you reach skill level 150, you can go ahead and vendor every remaining delicate copper wire. You don't need them anymore for the purposes of this guide. From 150 to 180, make 45 mithril filigree. This is an item that you'll need 45 of for the next steps, so make sure to make at least 45, and this should probably land you somewhere between 180 and 185 skill level. From 180 to 185, make as many solid stone statues as necessary to reach 185. Depending on where you landed on the previous step, you may be able to skip this altogether, or just make 1 or 2 crafts. It all depends on your luck. From 185 to 200, make 10 engraved true silver rings. Stays red for all 15 levels, so no need to overspend on reagents. From 200 to 210, make 10 true silver commander's rings. Also stays red for all 10 levels. From 210 to 220, make 10 aquamarine signets. Also stays red for 10 levels, no need to overspend. From 220 to 225, make 5 aquamarine pendant of the warrior. It stays red for all 5 levels, and at this point you can vendor or sell the remaining mithril filigrees. You won't need them anymore for the purposes of this guide. From 225 to 245, make 25 thorium settings. You'll need about 25 for the next step, so just make that many and then make more to reach 245 if necessary. From 245 to 275, make about 40 true silver healing rings. Most of you will land somewhere between 275 and 280. For the purposes of this guide, we'll assume you're 275, but generally you will probably need to make less of the next recipe. From 275 to 285, make 10 diamond focus ring. This stays red until 285, and because Azerothian diamond can be quite expensive, I recommend you buy just enough of what you need to get to 285, or at least buy a lot and sell the rest later. From 285 to 300, make about 20 onslaught rings. This recipe will be yellow for the last 10 levels, so you may need to make more or less depending on your luck. Either way, you'll need to be 300 to move on to Outland for the last steps of this guide, so make as many as necessary to take you to 300. At this point, you can vendor or sell any remaining reagents and vendor or disenchant any jewelry you made. It's now time to move to Outland, where you'll start making gems. But before you go there, get yourself a mercurial stone if you haven't already. This is an item that alchemists can make and you'll need it for this guide. Then you will need to go to either Tatiana in Honorhold or Kaelin in Thrallmar and buy any of the gem recipes that they sell. Any of these recipes work, but some of them will be cheaper to make than others, while at the same time, some will be worth more on the auction house than others. To help you choose, if you don't want to bother selling those on the auction house after you craft them, generally you'll want to make the green mixed gems. Those are generally very cheap to make depending on your server, of course. And then if you want to sell these on the auction house instead of a vendor, I would go for a red or yellow gem. Those will generally have the highest demand, so the highest price. It's up to you what to choose. This also applies to the blue quality gems that we will talk about later. So from 300 to 305, make 5 to 7 of any of these green quality gems. This recipe is yellow for all 5 levels, so around 7 is what you'll need to make on average, but you may need to make more or less depending on your luck again. From 305 to 325, you just unlocked a new recipe. Go ahead and buy the new 305 new recipes and make around 30 of any of these. This craft is yellow for all 20 levels, so again you may need to make more or less depending on your luck. From 325 to 330, make 10 mercurial adamantite. For this, you will need the mercurial stone that we talked about earlier, and you also need to go to a forge nearby. You will need 10 of these or more for an upcoming step, so as usual, make 10 and complete the rest if necessary. From 330 to 340, make 15 of any of these recipes. This craft is yellow for all 10 levels, so as usual, you may need more or less than 15 depending on your luck. From 340 to 350, make 10 heavy adamantite rings. This becomes yellow for 5 levels, so you may need to go back and make more mercurial adamantite depending on how lucky you are. From 350 to 365, this is where it starts to get really expensive and annoying to level. At this point, your only options are to buy a rare world drop recipe for a blue gem and make that up until level 365. Here are all the raw gems. If you search these on the auction house, you'll also find the recipes that use those. So go ahead and search the auction house for those recipes and buy the cheapest one you can find and make that up until 365. Remember, once you're 365, there's very little incentive to go above that. The only things that require more than 365 to make are the epic gems, which are not in the game as of now, the jewel crafting trinkets, and a few epic gear recipes that will be good for certain players in niche scenarios. But if you're not interested in any of these, I would recommend you stay 365 and just get from 365 to 375 by making yourself or your guild these gems naturally, or by actually making gold while crafting these gems. But if you really want to get to 375 ASAP, you can go ahead and buy some meta gem recipes and make that until 375. Those will be expensive and not all of them will turn back your profit. So choose based on what is worth good money and make that and then sell it on the auction house. But with that, this marks the end of this guide. I hope you found it interesting and valuable. If you did, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel for more classic TBC content like this. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.